Join us on Patreon and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
In the heart of the Ethiopian highlands, cradled within ancient monasteries and whispered about in the chants of priests, lies a sacred legacy largely unknown to much of the Western world. It is a legacy enshrined in a canon older, broader, and more mysterious than that of the Roman Church. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, a spiritual institution with roots that dig deep into the early centuries of Christianity, possesses a Bible that includes texts long forgotten, or perhaps intentionally excluded, by the Vatican and other mainstream Christian traditions. Among these lost treasures are the so-called forgotten prophets, whose words and visions are preserved not in the leather-bound Bibles of Rome or the gleaming cathedrals of Europe, but in the weathered parchment of the Jubilees manuscripts, passed down and protected by the Ethiopian clergy for centuries. The tale of these prophets is as much a journey through time as it is through theology. It begins not in the hills of Judea or the streets of Jerusalem, but rather in Aksum and Lalibela, ancient cities that were once centers of faith and scholarship. Here, Christianity flourished in parallel with that of Rome and Byzantium, but took a different path, one shaped by Semitic traditions, Judaic influences, and a unique African worldview. In this alternate stream of sacred history, texts such as the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, the Ascension of Isaiah, and the Book of the Covenant were not apocryphal curiosities. They were canon. They were scripture. They were prophecy. To understand why these prophets were forgotten by the Vatican, yet preserved in Ethiopia, one must first consider the formation of the biblical canon in the West. By the 4th century CE, during the reign of Emperor Constantine and the subsequent councils of Hippo, 393 CE, and Carthage, 397 CE, church leaders sought to define an official canon that would unify the diverse Christian sections. The result was a consolidation of texts deemed theologically sound and politically useful. Writings that didn't fit this mold, often those with strong apocalyptic, mystical, or cosmological themes, were excluded. Some were considered too Jewish in tone, others too speculative or visionary. Among these were the writings attributed to Enoch, Baruch, and others whose names faded from Western memory but remained sacred in the East. The Book of Enoch is perhaps the most well-known of these forgotten texts, and it plays a central role in the Ethiopian canon. In fact, the one Enoch is not just preserved. It is revered, studied, and cited in Ethiopian theology. Written in Guizi, the ancient liturgical language of Ethiopia, the Book of Enoch offers a cosmology unlike any found in the canonical Bible. It describes the fall of the Watchers, angelic beings who descend to earth and corrupt humankind, and reveals detailed visions of heaven, judgment, and the Messiah. It was once widely read by Second Temple Jews and early Christians alike. Indeed, the New Testament Epistle of Jude directly quotes Enoch, but it vanished from the canon of the Western Church. Why? Likely because its vivid angelology and radical eschatology pose too many questions and threats to the orderly orthodoxy the Church sought to establish. Then there is the Book of Jubilees, also called the Little Genesis, which rewrites the Genesis narrative with calendrical and legalistic precision that reflects ancient Jewish priestly traditions. It speaks of angelic intermediaries, cosmic time cycles, and divine revelation structured according to Jubilees, periods of 49 years. In the Ethiopian tradition, this text complements rather than contradicts the Torah. It was not a fringe supplement, but a foundational document that shaped liturgical calendars and theological concepts. Yet in the West, it was discarded, relegated to the margins by early church fathers and later deemed pseudepigrapha, false writings. The Ascension of Isaiah offers yet another glimpse into a mystical tradition of prophecy, tracing the journey of the prophet Isaiah through the 7 heavens, culminating in a vision of the incarnate Christ. It blends early Christian Christology with apocalyptic vision, weaving a narrative that was both profoundly spiritual and politically inconvenient for the developing doctrines of the Roman Church. Its portrayal of heavenly realms, angelic beings, and cosmic battles painted a picture of spiritual warfare too vast, too speculative, for the tight borders of Latin dogma. And yet, for the Ethiopian Church, it was truth, sacred truth, passed down through the centuries in illuminated manuscripts and recited in church liturgies. Equally significant are the texts known collectively as the Macabian or Ethiopian Maccabees, not to be confused with the Greek Maccabees found in Catholic Bibles. These books tell entirely different stories, tales of righteous kings, wars for the faith, and moral struggles rooted in an Ethiopian narrative world. They reflect a vision of history that is deeply local yet theologically universal, placing Ethiopia not at the margins of salvation history, but at its very center. The Macabian books offer moral teachings, prophecies, and prayers that have guided generations of Ethiopian Christians, yet they remain virtually unknown outside the Horn of Africa. All of this raises a profound question. Why were these voices silenced in the West but preserved in Ethiopia? Some scholars argue that the geopolitical and cultural isolation of Ethiopia protected its religious heritage from the editorial forces of Rome. Others suggest that Ethiopia's embrace of both Judaic and Christian traditions allowed it to retain texts that were too Hebraic or too mystical for the Greco-Roman mind. Still others see in this divergence a deliberate act of preservation, a spiritual resistance to theological colonization. Whatever the reason, the result is a canon unlike any other, a repository of ancient voices who continue to speak across time, if only we are willing to listen. In recent decades, scholars have begun to rediscover these texts, translating them into modern languages and exploring their implications for our understanding of early Christianity. The Vatican, too, has shown increasing interest in interfaith dialogue and the broader Christian tradition, though it has not moved to revise its canon. Meanwhile, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church continues to celebrate these prophets, not as footnotes in a forgotten theology, but as living witnesses to a broader, deeper faith. This is the paradox and the miracle of the forgotten prophets. They were excluded, erased, and exiled from the Western canon, yet they survived. They survived not in the vaults of the Vatican, but in the chants of Ethiopian monks and the ink of their sacred scrolls. And today, as the global church seeks to reconnect with its roots, perhaps these prophets, once forgotten, will speak again.